No one could tame the Vampire King's daughter. That's what every servant whispered in the dark corridors of Castle Valen. Seraphina Raverin lasted one night, one braid, one impossible act of tenderness that would shatter a century of terror. There was a woman no one saw, a woman invisible in a kingdom of immortals and shadows. And yet it was her, Seraphina Raverin, who did what 50 royal nannies could not. Because the little girl everyone in the castle feared, the daughter of the vampire king, Dragomir Valen, was untouchable. Princess Seraphina Valen, 11 years old with freckles and haunted eyes. She had once been the light of the entire realm. Now there was only screaming. Welcome to our channel. If you're new here, we'd love to know where you're watching from, and please subscribe. 50 caretakers had fled. Governesses resigned in the dead of night, leaving their belongings behind. She hurled furniture with her mind, froze entire rooms with a single sob, and locked her heart behind walls no magic could breach. But that impossible night was still hours away. King Dragomir Valen sat alone in his study, surrounded by darkness he no longer bothered to dispel. The only illumination came from his own eyes, twin embers of crimson that had watched empires rise and fall, that had seen 1,000 battlefields and never once flinched. Until now. Above him, the ceiling shuddered. A crash echoed through the stone walls, followed by the splintering of wood. Then came the sound that haunted every corner of Castle Valen, a child's scream, raw and broken, that made even the immortal servants freeze in terror. Dragomir didn't move. He'd learned months ago that running to her only made it worse. The 50th resignation letter lay crumpled on his desk. Asterisk, the princess is beyond mortal care. Her power is uncontrollable. Her grief has made her a danger to all who approach. Respectfully, Your Majesty, I value my life. Asterisk. He closed his eyes. Not again. They called it the curse of the Valens. A poison that ran through his bloodline, they said. Dragomir had never believed in curses. He believed in enemies, in strategy, in the cold logic of survival. But now, listening to his daughter destroy another room, he wondered if the whispers had been right all along. In the servants' quarters 3 floors below, Seraphina Raverin moved silently among the staff, wringing out her scrub brush in a bucket of murky water. No one looked at her. No one ever did. She was part of the furniture, another shadow in a castle full of them. She's getting worse, a young maid whispered. The glass shattered in my hands. You were lucky, an older woman muttered. Last week, Governess Thorne tried to read to her. The books flew off the shelves like missiles. She was gone by nightfall. They say the princess has the devil in her. Enough. The head housekeeper's voice cut through the murmurs. The princess is a child. A grieving child. Mind your tongues. But even she wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Seraphina said nothing. She picked up her bucket and slipped out, her footsteps silent on the cold stone. The grand staircase stretched before her, marble steps worn smooth by centuries. She knelt and began to scrub, her hands raw and red from the lye soap. 3 silver coins. That's what she'd earned tonight. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was all she had. She worked methodically, her mind far away. Somewhere warmer. Somewhere a little girl's laughter had once filled the air, before the fever took her, before the world became nothing but silence and stone. Another crash from above jolted her back. The chandelier overhead swayed. Frost crept across the windows in unnatural patterns. Seraphina kept scrubbing. Whatever happened in the towers above was none of her concern. She was just a cleaner. Invisible. Until she heard it. A sound so soft she almost missed it. Not a scream. Not the crash of furniture. A whimper. Small and broken and achingly human. Seraphina's hands stilled. She looked toward the forbidden wing. The sound came again, a child's sob, muffled and desperate. The other servants had described a monster. A curse given flesh. But that sound, that wasn't a monster. That was a little girl who missed her mother. Seraphina set down her brush. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From recognition. From a grief she knew too well. Every logical part of her mind screamed to stay away, to keep her head down, to survive another day. But her feet were already moving toward the stairs. Toward the forbidden wing. Toward the soft, broken whimper behind a half-open door. The forbidden wing smelled of frost and old sorrow. Only pale moonlight filtered through grimy windows to guide her way. She should turn back. One misstep, and she'd be thrown out with nothing. But that whimper. Her hand found the door handle, ice-cold beneath her palm. She pushed it open slowly. The nursery had once been beautiful. Hand-painted murals of starlit forests now faded. A carved rocking horse overturned. Books scattered like fallen soldiers. A canopy bed draped in shredded silk. Enchanted crystals pulsed with sickly purple light. Protection spells. Not to keep something out. To keep something in. The temperature was wrong. Too cold. Frost crept across the floorboards. And beneath the bed, two small hands clutched a torn silk scarf. Seraphina knelt down slowly. Green eyes stared back. Wide. Terrified. Ringed with red from crying. Princess Seraphina Valen was smaller than Seraphina had imagined. 11 years old, but she looked younger huddled in her nightgown, auburn hair tangled around her freckled face. Her lips were tinged blue from the cold she'd created. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Seraphina smiled. Not the practiced, fearful smile servants gave to royalty. A real smile. Soft and sad and understanding. "Hello, little one," she whispered. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. The temperature dropped. A book began to rattle. "I'm not here to hurt you," Seraphina continued gently. "I just heard you crying. And I thought, maybe you could use a friend." "I don't want friends." The child's voice was hoarse. "Everyone leaves." "I know." Seraphina's throat tightened. "I know that feeling." Seraphina's expression shifted. Less feral. More curious. "You're not a governess." "No. I'm a cleaner." "Then why are you here?" "Because I'm a mother," Seraphina said quietly. "And mothers can't walk away from crying children. Not even ones they've never met." The words hung in the frozen air. Slowly, carefully, Seraphina extended her hand. "Would you like to come out? That floor must be awfully cold." Seraphina stared at the offered hand as if it might disappear. Then, inch by trembling inch, she crawled forward. She was so small. So heartbreakingly fragile despite the power crackling around her. Seraphina helped her sit, noting how the child flinched at even the gentlest touch. "Your hair's gotten all tangled," Seraphina murmured. "That must pull something awful." She pulled a small wooden comb from her apron pocket. Worn smooth from years of use. She'd used it once on another little girl's hair, in another lifetime. "May I?" Seraphina didn't answer. But she didn't pull away. Seraphina gathered a section of tangled auburn hair and began to work through it, patient and careful. And then, without thinking, she began to hum. An old lullaby. Simple and sweet and achingly human. The effect was immediate. The rattling stopped. The frost receded. The oppressive cold lifted. The enchanted crystals dimmed. Seraphina kept humming, kept braiding. 3 strands over and under, weaving order from chaos. Seraphina's breathing slowed. Her shoulders relaxed. The haunted look in her eyes softened into something that looked almost like peace. And then the door exploded inward. King Dragomir Valen filled the doorway, crimson eyes blazing. His fangs were extended, his hands crackling with dark magic, ready to destroy whatever threat had entered his daughter's room. But he froze. His daughter sat on the floor, her face calm for the first time in 6 months. And kneeling behind her, still humming that simple lullaby, was a woman in a cleaner's apron, weaving a braid through Seraphina's hair. The silence stretched. Dragomir's magic flickered and died. His fangs retracted. The most powerful creature in the realm, utterly paralyzed by the impossible sight. "Papa," Seraphina whispered. Not a scream. Just a word. Small and tentative and achingly hopeful. Dragomir's ancient heart felt like it might shatter. His eyes met Seraphina's. She looked back without fear, without apology. Just quiet understanding between two people who knew what it meant to lose everything. "What is your name?" His voice was raw. "Seraphina Raverin, Your Majesty." "You're a cleaner." "Yes, Your Majesty." He looked at his daughter. At the peace on her face. At the miracle unfolding on his nursery floor. "Not anymore." Dragomir's voice shook. "As of this moment, you are my daughter's caretaker. Her nanny. Her, whatever she needs you to be." He paused. "Name your price." Seraphina's hands stilled. "I don't want money, Your Majesty." "Then what do you want?" She looked down at the little girl in her arms. At the freckles on her nose. At the way she was fighting not to fall asleep against Seraphina's shoulder. "To help her," Seraphina said simply. "That's all. Tell us where you're watching from. Would you be brave enough to enter that room? Let us know in the comments." The servants didn't know what to make of it when Seraphina climbed the stairs the next morning, not with a mop and bucket, but with fresh linens and wildflowers. The head housekeeper nearly dropped her tray. "You're actually going back up there?" "I work here now," Seraphina said simply. "You'll be dead by nightfall." But Seraphina was already gone. She found Seraphina curled beneath the covers, the braids still intact. The child's eyes opened, wary but not hostile. "You came back," Seraphina whispered. "I told you I would." Seraphina crossed to the windows. "Now then, let's do something about this darkness." She pulled back the heavy curtains. Sunlight poured into the room, and Seraphina gasped, not in pain, but in wonder. The murals on the walls suddenly came alive with color. "When's the last time you saw the sun?" Seraphina asked. Seraphina's voice was small. "Mama used to open the curtains every morning. After no one did anymore. Well, I'm doing it now." Seraphina arranged the wildflowers on the windowsill. "You're a little girl, not a prisoner." Over the following days, Seraphina transformed the nursery from a tomb into a home. She swept up broken glass, righted furniture, and salvaged books, reading titles aloud until Seraphina showed interest. "That one," the girl said, pointing to fairy tales. "Excellent choice." Seraphina settled into the rocking chair, and Seraphina climbed into her lap. The child was all sharp angles and nervous energy, but she tucked herself against Seraphina's shoulder like she was trying to remember how. Seraphina read about brave girls and enchanted forests. When she finished, Seraphina looked up. "Is it true you were a mother?" Seraphina's hands tightened on the book. "Yes." "What happened to her?" A pause, heavy with old grief. "The fever took her before I could save her. Her name was Lily. She was 7. Did she like stories too?" "She loved them. I used to tell her one every night." Seraphina was quiet. "Then, will you tell me stories? Like you told her?" Seraphina's eyes burned. "Every single night, if you want." And she did. She told Seraphina about the village where she'd grown up, about the baker who made bread that smelled like happiness. Ordinary stories. Human stories. The kind that had nothing to do with magic or curses. Seraphina drank them in like someone dying of thirst. What Seraphina didn't know was that they had an audience. King Dragomir stood in the shadowed alcove outside, listening to his daughter's laughter. Actual laughter. He'd forgotten she could make that sound. Through the crack in the door, he watched Seraphina teach Seraphina a clapping game. Seraphina stumbled over the words and dissolved into giggles. Something in Dragomir's chest, something he'd thought long dead, stirred painfully. This wasn't power. This was something softer. Something he'd lost when Alara died. Hope. His crimson eyes softened as he watched the cleaner turn Nanny braid flowers into his daughter's hair. For the first time in a century, Dragomir allowed himself to believe they could heal. He didn't see the shadow that flickered behind him. That night, after Seraphina left Seraphina with a candle burning low, the darkness seemed to deepen. The temperature dropped, but not from Seraphina's power. From something else. The shadows in the corners didn't move the way shadows should. They writhed. Watched. Seraphina pulled her blankets tighter, eyes fixed on the darkest corner. "I know you're there," she whispered. A voice like wind through a graveyard answered. Inside her head. Asterisk, she cannot protect you, little princess. She is weak. Mortal. Temporary. Asterisk. Go away. Asterisk, I am the only one who understands your pain. I am the only one who will never leave. Asterisk. You're not real. Asterisk, did she tell you what happens to mortal women who love too deeply? They break. They fade. They die. Asterisk. Stop it. Asterisk, your mother loved you. Where is she now? Asterisk. Seraphina squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking down her cheeks. The cold wrapped around her like a serpent. When Seraphina entered the next morning, she found Seraphina awake, but pale, dark circles under her eyes. Did you sleep, sweetheart? Seraphina hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, the cold man came again. Seraphina knelt beside the bed. The cold man. He talks to me at night. He's been here since Mama died. He says. She trailed off. He says you'll leave me too. That everyone does. Seraphina's blood ran cold. What does this cold man look like? I don't know. He's just shadow. And cold. And he knows sad things. Seraphina's lip trembled. He's always watching. Seraphina glanced at the corners. In the morning light, they looked ordinary. But she felt it now, a wrongness in the air. She took Seraphina's face in her hands, gentle but firm. Listen to me. I don't know what he is, but I know what he isn't. He isn't stronger than us. And he's wrong. I'm not leaving you. But even as she said it, Seraphina felt the temperature drop by a single, deliberate degree. And in the darkest corner, something that wasn't quite shadow shifted and smiled. Seraphina couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It followed her through the corridors. When she tucked Seraphina in, she'd catch movement in her peripheral vision, shadows that stretched too far, that moved against the candlelight. And Seraphina was getting worse. Not explosive tantrums. This was different. Quieter. More insidious. The girl would wake screaming from nightmares. Her appetite vanished. The warmth they'd built seemed to be draining away. He's getting stronger, Seraphina whispered one morning, pale as parchment. The cold man. He's angry that you're here. That was when Seraphina decided to find answers. She waited until Seraphina was napping, then made her way to Queen Alara's chambers, the rooms that had remained sealed since her death. The door yielded to a hairpin and patience. Seraphina slipped inside. Would you be brave enough to enter that room? Let us know in the comments. The room was a shrine. Everything remained as the queen had left it, a hairbrush tangled with auburn hair, a half-finished embroidery, books stacked on the bedside table, all covered in dust. Seraphina moved to the writing desk. Several journals sat in a neat row. She pulled out the most recent one and began to read. The early entries were mundane. But as she turned pages, the tone shifted. The handwriting became erratic. Asterisk, Seraphina has been having nightmares. She says there's something in her room. Something that whispers. I've tripled the protection wards, but they don't help. Asterisk. Several pages later. Asterisk, I consulted with the court mage. He says what I'm describing sounds like a shadow blight, a parasitic entity drawn to concentrated magical grief. They feed on sorrow, on loss, on places where love has curdled into despair. Asterisk. Seraphina's hands tightened. Asterisk, shadow blights attach themselves to the most vulnerable, usually children, and feed on their emotional energy. The more isolated the child becomes, the stronger the blight grows. It creates a cycle. The creature feeds on grief, which creates more grief, which feeds the creature. Asterisk. The next entry was dated a week before Queen Alara's death. Asterisk, it's in me too. I can feel it, cold and hungry, wrapping around my heart. I've been researching banishment rituals, but everything says the same thing. A shadow blight cannot be destroyed by magic alone. It feeds on magic. The only way to weaken it is to starve it. To replace grief with love. Isolation with connection. Fear with hope. Asterisk. The final entry was a single line. Asterisk, it's too late for me. But maybe not for her. Love her enough for both of us. Don't let the darkness win. Asterisk. Seraphina's vision blurred. She understood now. The shadow blight had consumed Alara, then transferred its full attention to Seraphina. A child already primed by grief. Already vulnerable. The temperature plummeted. Seraphina's breath misted. The candles died, plunging the chamber into shadow. And in those shadows, something moved. It coiled and writhed like smoke given terrible purpose. Within it, she could almost see a shape. Tall. Skeletal. With eyes like empty voids. You should not have come here, mortal. The voice scraped against her mind like ice. Seraphina stumbled backward, clutching the journal. You're the shadow blight. Asterisk, I am grief given form. I am the price of loving too deeply in a world too cruel. Asterisk, the shadow stretched toward her. And you are making it worse. I'm helping her. You are giving her hope. The entity's fury made the windows rattle. Asterisk, hope is the cruelest poison. Because when you leave, when you die, when you inevitably abandon her like everyone else, the despair will be exquisite. And I will feast. Asterisk. I'm not leaving. The shadow struck. It wrapped around her arm like frozen iron, so cold it burned. Seraphina screamed, clawing at the darkness. But there was nothing solid to grab. Only cold. Only pain. Then it released her. Seraphina collapsed, gasping. The shadow receded, leaving behind cruel laughter. She looked down at her forearm. A mark spread across her skin like black ice crystallizing beneath the surface. The veins had darkened, spreading slowly toward her elbow. She was still staring at it when the door burst open. Dragomir stood there, crimson eyes wide with alarm. In 2 strides, he was beside her, lifting her injured arm. His face went white. Frostburn, he breathed. From a shadow entity. His eyes snapped to hers. What did you see? The cold man, Seraphina managed. It's a shadow blight. It killed your wife, and now it's feeding on Seraphina. On her grief. Dragomir's jaw clenched. He looked at the mark on her arm, and something in his ancient eyes cracked open. This is my fault, he whispered. Your Majesty. My grief. My sorrow. It's been feeding the creature too. He stepped back as if he himself were poison. I thought I was protecting her by keeping everyone away. But I was making her more vulnerable. And now it's targeting you because you're weakening it. He looked at her with anguish. It will kill you, Seraphina. To get to her, it will drain you until there's nothing left. Seraphina met his gaze steadily, despite the pain. Then we'd better find a way to destroy it first. For 3 days, Seraphina kept the frostburn hidden beneath long sleeves. She wrapped it in herbs, though nothing slowed the spread of blackened veins crawling toward her shoulder. The cold had settled into her bones, making her movements stiff, her breathing shallow. But she kept reading to Seraphina, kept braiding her hair, kept opening the curtains each morning, even as her own light dimmed. Dragomir noticed. He'd lived for over a century, and he knew what death looked like. He saw it in Seraphina's trembling hands, in the pallor of her skin, in the way she had to pause and catch her breath. The shadow blight was draining her. On the 4th morning, he made his decision. Seraphina was in the nursery when Dragomir entered. His face was carved from stone, his crimson eyes cold and distant. Seraphina, he said, formal. Leave us. The girl looked between them confused. But Papa. Now. Seraphina flinched. She fled the room, casting a worried glance back. The door closed with heavy finality. Seraphina stood slowly, her heart sinking. She knew that look. Your Majesty. Your services are no longer required, Dragomir said, clipped and precise. You will leave the castle by nightfall. The words hit like a physical blow. What? You are dismissed, Miss Raverin. No. Seraphina stepped forward. Seraphina needs me. My daughter needs a caretaker who isn't dying. His eyes flicked to her sleeve, where the frostburn had begun to show. You're a liability now. The situation has become untenable. Because I'm fighting for her? Seraphina's voice shook. Because I'm the only thing standing between her and that creature? Because you are mortal and fragile, and you will die if you stay here. The mask cracked for just a moment. Then he slammed it back. I will not watch another woman he stopped himself. Another person who cares for my daughter be destroyed by the darkness in this castle. So you're sending me away? Seraphina's eyes burned. You're abandoning the one thing that's actually helping her. I'm protecting you. By breaking her heart? By proving the shadow blight right? She moved closer, desperate. Don't you see? This is exactly what it wants. Isolation. Abandonment. You're feeding it. Enough. His voice was arctic. My decision is final. You have until sunset. Dragomir, please. That's King Valen to you, Miss Raverin. Remember your place. He turned toward the door. Guards will escort you out. Do not attempt to see my daughter again. The cruelty in his voice was a weapon. Seraphina knew what he was doing, making it hurt so she would leave. But it didn't make it less devastating. 2 guards entered. They took her by the arms and began to lead her from the room she'd filled with sunlight and hope. You're making a mistake, she said, voice breaking. Dragomir didn't turn around. Ensure she reaches the village safely. Give her a month's wages. They dragged her through the corridor, past servants who wouldn't meet her eyes, down the grand staircase. Seraphina didn't struggle. But as they descended, she heard it, a child's voice, raw with panic. Seraphina. She twisted to see Seraphina running down the hallway, nightgown trailing. Dragomir caught his daughter around the waist, holding her back. No, you can't take her. Papa, please. Seraphina. Their eyes met across the distance. Seraphina mouthed 2 words, I'm sorry. Then the guards pulled her around the corner, and Seraphina's screams followed her all the way to the gates. The night air was bitter as they deposited her at the village edge with a small purse. Seraphina stood alone, watching the castle silhouette against the stars. She'd failed. Just like the shadow blight said she would. Inside the nursery, Seraphina had stopped screaming. Dragomir stood outside her door, listening to the terrible, hollow silence. Seraphina, he called softly. Daughter, please. You sent her away. The voice was flat. Empty. You promised you'd protect me. But you're just like everyone else. You lie. I did it to save her. You did it because you're scared. Seraphina's voice rose, sharp with betrayal. Because you'd rather be alone in the dark than risk loving someone again. That's not. But he never finished. The temperature dropped so violently that frost exploded across every surface. The windows shattered outward. Every candle, every torch, every light extinguished simultaneously. Dragomir's breath misted in the sudden darkness. Then he heard it. Laughter. Not Seraphina's. Something ancient and hungry and triumphant. The shadows began to move. They poured from the corners like spilled ink, spreading across walls, floors, ceilings. They coiled and twisted, growing denser until they formed a shape. Massive. Skeletal. With eyes like empty graves. The shadow blight had been hiding its true form. Waiting. And now, fed by a child's absolute despair, it was finally strong enough to manifest. Thank you, King Valen, the creature whispered. For giving me exactly what I needed. From inside, Dragomir heard his daughter sobbing, but the sound was wrong, muffled. He threw open the door. Seraphina was suspended in midair, wrapped in tendrils of living shadow that pulsed and writhed. Her eyes were open but vacant, her freckled face slack. The shadows were pouring into her mouth, her nose, her ears filling her up, consuming her from the inside. No. Dragomir lunged forward, his magic blazing. But the moment his power touched the shadow blight, it simply absorbed it, growing stronger. The creature's laughter shook the castle's foundations. In the village below, Seraphina felt the tremor. She looked up and saw it, a vortex of dark energy spiraling upward from the highest tower, blotting out the stars. Her frost-burned arm throbbed. And despite everything, she knew exactly what she had to do. She started running back up the mountain. The mountain path was steep and treacherous, but Seraphina didn't slow down. Her lungs burned. The black veins had spread past her shoulder now, creeping toward her heart. She didn't care. Above her, the castle had become a nightmare. The vortex tore at the sky, howling. Black lightning crackled through the darkness. She could feel Seraphina in there. Terrified. Dying. Alone. Not alone. Never alone. She reached the gates to find them blown open. The courtyard was a war zone, statues toppled, cobblestones cracked, frost covering everything. She ran inside. The grand staircase was collapsing. Seraphina jumped gaps, pulled herself over broken sections, her hands bleeding. She could hear fighting above, Dragomir's roar, the crack of magic, the Blight's laughter. The nursery door was gone, torn away. Seraphina stumbled through and fell to her knees from the sheer force of darkness. Shadow tendrils whipped through the air. Furniture spun in a vortex. The temperature was so cold her tears froze on her cheeks. Dragomir was bleeding from a dozen wounds, hurling blast after blast of crimson magic. But every attack was absorbed, making the shadow blight grow larger. And suspended in the center, wrapped in writhing darkness, was Seraphina. The girl's eyes were open but empty. Her freckled skin had gone gray. The shadows poured into her like smoke into a bottle. She's mine now, the blight hissed. From the moment her mother died, from the moment her father chose fear over love, from the moment you abandoned her. I didn't abandon her, Seraphina said. The creature's attention snapped to her. You came back. How wonderfully foolish. Now I can drain you both. You can't have her. Seraphina forced herself to stand. She's not yours. She never was. Then whose is she, mortal? A father too broken to save her? A dying nanny? The blight laughed. She belongs to grief. To me. No. Seraphina took a step forward, then another, walking directly into the storm. The shadows lashed at her, tore at her skin. The pain was unbearable. She belongs to herself. And she is loved. Seraphina, don't! Dragomir's shout was cut off as the blight struck him across the room. But Seraphina was already moving. She dove through the whirlwind of shadow and thrust her hands into the darkness. It burned like frozen fire. The black veins spread instantly, racing across her chest, her neck, her face. She could feel the blight draining her, consuming her utterly. She didn't let go. Her fingers found warmth beneath the shadow. A small hand. Cold and limp. Seraphina, she gasped. I'm here. I'm right here. I am never leaving you. Never. The fingers twitched. That's it, sweetheart. Come back to me. The shadows shrieked, tightening their grip. Seraphina's vision darkened. The frostburn had reached her core. She was dying. Then another hand clasped hers. Dragomir. The vampire king had fought through the storm. His hand wrapped around Seraphina's, and through that touch to Seraphina. Both of you, he said, voice breaking. I'm not losing both of you. He poured everything into them. A century of life force. Immortal strength that had toppled kingdoms. Power hoarded for 100 years, given freely in a single moment. It flowed through Seraphina like lightning, warm, brilliant, alive, and into Seraphina. Father, mother, child. A circuit of love so pure, so absolute, that the shadow blight recoiled as if burned. No, it hissed. Grief is stronger than love, despair always wins. Not today, Seraphina whispered. The light exploded outward. Not magical light. Just the simple, devastating power of 3 people refusing to let go of each other. The shadow blight screamed. Its form cracked, fractured, light pouring through like dawn breaking through storm clouds. It thrashed and fought, but there was nothing left to feed on. No isolation. No abandonment. No despair. Only love. Stubborn, fierce, unbreakable love. The creature shattered. The darkness burst apart and dissolved like smoke in sunlight. No cold. No whispers. No hollow eyes. Just silence. Seraphina collapsed, still holding Serina's hand. Dragomir caught them both as they fell to their knees together. Serina gasped, a real breath, and her green eyes focused. Saw Seraphina's face. Saw her father's arms around them both. "You came back," she whispered. Seraphina smiled through her tears. "I told you I would." The castle was still. Through the broken windows, the first rays of dawn crept in, painting everything gold and rose. Dragomir looked at Seraphina. At the frostburn marks already fading from her skin. At the woman who had saved his daughter by refusing to give up. Who had saved him by showing that love was always stronger than fear. He was the Vampire King. He had ruled for over a century with absolute authority. He had never knelt before anyone. He knelt now. "Stay," he said, voice raw. "Not as a cleaner. Not as a nanny. As..." He swallowed. "As family. If you'll have us." Seraphina looked down at Serina, who clung to her with desperate hope in her freckled face. At Dragomir, this ancient creature looking at her like she was the miracle he'd stopped believing in. At the nursery around them, destroyed but already touched by morning light. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll stay." Serina sobbed with relief and buried her face in Seraphina's shoulder. Dragomir wrapped his arms around them both, and for the first time in 6 months, maybe in a century, Castle Valen was filled with something other than grief. It was filled with hope. And in the corner where the deepest shadow had once lived, there was only sunlight. Family isn't always blood. It's who stands by you in the storm. Share your biggest lesson from Seraphina's story below. Encourage us by subscribing and turn on the notification bell to be the first to know when our next story drops. Thank you for watching.